Greetings. It's late, just after 10 p.m. on June 27th, 2018. And I just got back from a Toastmasters meeting in Ada, which was really cool. Found out a guy I knew for a number of years, or a number of years ago mostly, from a different self-development group in Grand Haven, Frank. He was in Toastmasters because it was published online that I'm the first one in District 62, which is most of the state of Michigan, to complete a pathway, which is a new educational program they rolled out. So it was a total of 15 speeches, and I was the first one to do it. Didn't even know I was on track to do that. I just fill in a lot of times when other speakers have to not give a speech for some personal reason, and I always jump in. So I was the first one to do that, which is interesting because there are other people gunning for it, and I wasn't even trying, and I did. Funny how stuff like that works out. At the meeting, saw a bunch of other people I know, Frank and Judith, which I knew from that same other developmental group, and Spencer that I know through Toastmasters, and Laura was there, who's the one that pointed out that I was on track to do that as well. Super interesting, and even in the raffle, won a book on public speaking, which is pretty cool. They were having their officer induction ceremony, and it went well. I got to give a tiny little a few minute speech, and some people were surprised. Judith was surprised because she knew me as being super shy, which I still am kind of reserved, I guess, at times. But when I speak, I'm a little more dynamic, and I even toned it down quite a bit for that one. So really interesting stuff. And next, my Uncle Carl died, not wholly unexpected because he was missing his legs, and he had heart issues and that type of stuff. But it really freaked my mom out, which really freaked me out a little bit that she freaked out. So I've been trying to comprehend that over the last couple of days. Very interesting. And see, I wrote a series of articles essentially on grief and loss and fear and these types of things, called it The Most Important Question in Philosophy, which I started with Albert Camus's question on whether life is worth living. Right, there jumps right in. I mean, the first line includes suicide, I believe. And I believe I did that 4-5 part essay, something like that. It's a blog post, and I haven't actually put it into the essay to submit it to the International Society for Philosophers. I will eventually. But there's interesting perspectives in there. So I don't feel grief like I would say normal grief feels now anymore. I don't, because my perspective is changed on it quite a bit. It's really interesting because I stupidly forgot that other people don't get that. And it took me, even after realizing these things, it took me a number of years to kind of process them in a deep enough way that it actually worked or affected me emotionally instead of just intellectually. So also stupidly, I kind of assume when I write or just tell people how to do these things that they'll also have that same perspective on grief and the same experience, which they won't. And so it's very interesting, which, I mean, you could make, well, it is interesting. I could make such a huge difference in people's lives, getting them to process grief differently like that. Almost like a pre-grief type of perspective, which is really interesting. We could go deep into that. Some of the basic ideas are that, right, when someone dies, what have you lost? That was a key question for me to figure out, right? I spent years trying to study grief and death and loss and meaning of life and this type of stuff. And I mean, starting at 13, I got really strong into that. There's a good speech and story that can go with that. But what have you lost? Well, so you lost that person's future, but that person's future is something you were imagining, right? It didn't exist. It was something made up. It never actually happened, right? But their life, what they actually had happened in their life, can't be taken away by their death because it's set in rocks, more rock solid than stone in the past. It happened and can't be taken away. So what actually transpired over the life can't be taken away at all. And the future that was taken away never existed. It's not real. All right. So once you get that perspective down, it's like, bam, and then even drive it in a little harder. So if you are saying the future was taken away, You know what else you lost? You lost all of the pain and all of the bad stuff that they would have experienced and gone through. So do those things really equal out? It's once you get these perspectives. I mean, I obviously have to think deeply about them. You can't just hear them, and you have to emotionally experience them to really process them. Then people dying becomes a completely different type of thing. I mean, Krista messaged me about Carl dying, and my response was, okay, that's that is my actual response. And I had that a couple of years ago when my grandma died, and everyone, I don't know, everyone thought it was a huge deal. And these ones you see coming. It's even harder with the ones you don't see coming, but it's the same type of process. So very interesting, and well, it's just made me realize that just telling people may not be as useful as I thought, or maybe I should promote it more. Or maybe it's important. Maybe I should try to get it out to people and get people to understand, or run little seminars and get them to experience it, or I mean, never experience grief again could be a very popular book, kind of gimmicky title, but nevertheless, those types of titles a lot of times do sell, and yeah, it's important. Once you change your perspective on that, life becomes a lot less worse, right? Life's pretty bad a lot of times, and that different perspective on grief, I think it's huge. Uh, and I don't know, I've just been really thinking about it. I didn't realize my mother was going to react that way, because we've talked about some of my perspectives on grief, and I thought she kind of understood them, but even if you understand them intellectually, you haven't processed them, so they don't actually affect you emotionally, especially in the moment, and I guess it probably took me a few years after those realizations for all of that to really sink in and get in there in a way that it's my natural response now is to already process things in that way about loss, right? So super interesting. Anyways, also I've been thinking about anxiety and depression, because I go through a cycle. It's not right. It's not like bipolar. It's not super extreme. It's definitely more on the depressive end, anyways. But I do get these little semi-manic states. Might be called cyclothymia, something like that. Oh, where it's just less than on the lower end mostly. And I started writing down. Oh man, I don't know. Should have grabbed that wherever I put my little notebook. But at one point, I started writing down some of the things I was saying in my head, which was interesting because, oh yeah, kind of right here. So I started writing down some of the things I was saying in my head when you're going into either anxiety or depression, which they're highly related, because you start worrying about the future, and then you think it's not going to work out good, and then right, it's all downhill from there. But a lot of what ifs, right? What if this bad thing happens? What if this, all very realistic, right? What if my neck goes out of place again? What if I react to this food? What if my really cheap car breaks down? What if uh, what if one of the companies I'm teaching for doesn't pay me, or fires me, or goes broke? Or what if this, what if that, what if, right? And very easy to go that way. And I think maybe because I'm naturally creative, or I have a natural really high openness, right, in the top few percent, and maybe 97th percentile, something like that, is I'm really open, right? So I'm kind of open to everything. And well, once you start playing the what if game with me, right, it's highly unlikely that you're going to win, because I'm really good at coming up with what ifs. I'm really good at filling in blanks, the little games where they like give you a pen and say how many uses can you make out of this. I've never hit a limit, because you can just make up more stuff, man. Like, the pen can be turned into a boat. Right. It's just kind of infinite. Like it might be really hard to connect things, and this is probably why I think relational frame theory in psychology is so interesting. The human mind can relate any two things. Well, but that's from my perspective, but that's very true. Maybe that's not true for everyone, because if you don't have a high intellect, and a high openness, maybe you need both. You really can relate any two things, and I think to a large extent all humans can. But my view is obviously slanted from my view, and maybe that is giving me a little different perspective on that. Anyways, so some of the other stuff is like I probably can't. right? I probably can't do this. I probably can't do that. It probably won't work. It probably won't run. It probably won't whatever. I don't like this. I don't like that. So those were my natural patterns that started going through my head. And I was just trying to record them, which was hard. And when you're in a negative mood, and I just kind of listing negatives on stuff too, but mostly like subconsciously. I'm not trying to do these things. I wasn't writing bad things down. But my thought was if I could capture those, which it was like these, if you could reverse them, right? So, like, what if statements are highly associated with anxiety and depression to a huge extent? Basically, everyone that's going into anxiety and depression is asking some version of these what if questions. Well, I think my openness really goes with that well, too. What if you just reversed it, right? So, what if this good thing happened? What if I did this good thing? So, a lot of, and this is what I wrote down right here. What if, right? Ellipses, dot, 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 question mark, bad, passive, in two separate parentheses. Because when I was feeling really negative, that's what I was doing. What if this bad thing happens? But also I was passive. What if this bad thing happens to me, right? I was the effect. Well, what if you reverse both those? What if I do this good thing? And that's very interesting. I'm obviously still playing with it. And you can also reverse other things, right? I can probably, what if this good active thing? I probably could, I probably can. I'm thankful for that. I'm grateful for that. I like that. I'm glad that. I'm happy that. And kind of fill in the blanks and see if you could use the same type of mental patterns, essentially conceptual patterns expressed in words in your mind, to reverse those and use it the other way. So really interesting. I've been playing and listing pluses instead of negatives. I've been playing with it for the last couple of days, and it seems to do something. I haven't taken it very far, but maybe I should. Over the last couple of days too, getting negative like that, I have really fallen off on eating, which I was experimenting with stuff anyways. And there's this thing called the Type A, Type B diet from Dr. Newbold. It's from like the early 90s. It's out of print now. I think you can buy one on Amazon for a little over $200. Luckily, you can find an online PDF too if you go to justmeat.co. They have all sorts of stuff really interesting. And right, obviously, I've had a ton of success on the carnivore type diet, but I don't like it. Like I I like how I feel on it, but I don't like just eating meat. I was really open with food, that's for sure. There was almost nothing I didn't not like, right? I mean, obviously, it's really easy to go overboard on cilantro, but I would even eat cilantro. Like and now, right, and then you can't eat anything except for meat, and it's so limited. And I think if I could add sauces and stuff like that, like if I could do barbecue ribs instead of just plain ribs, if I could do stuff, right, instead of just burger or ground burger, I could do like taco flavored burger, then maybe I could do something. So I'm going to play with that more, and maybe I'm reacting to something. Now I know I react strongly to corn. I tried corn on the cob and tried a couple other things of corn over the last several months, and I react really bad to corn. So maybe if corn syrups and stuff, maybe I'll react to that, and corn starch, which there's like corn and everything. There's a few main things that feed a lot of the world, right? Like corn, wheat, potatoes, rice, these basic grains either feed humans, and a lot of the food is built out of them, or they feed the animals that feed the humans. So they're really foundational to keeping us alive. And I react really badly to, well, basically all grains, vegetables, and fruits. So, and chicken for some reason. I don't know. Chicken still confuses me. Anyways, now I also have, I didn't bring it in here, should have brought it in here. I went and brought one of the floaty tubes for pools, because I've been using a towel under my neck to try to restore lordosis, whether I had it or not, give lordosis. And that seems to be helping stabilize my neck a little bit. Now, I've run into a little bit of a conundrum in that as my neck seems more stabilized, which it works best if I'm on a reclined 45-degree angle. I tried it on the floor over a series of months. It didn't work great, and I backed off and tried different stuff. 45-degree angle reclined in a recliner works really good with it under my neck. Well, that works out perfect for watching TV. And when I'm feeling really bad, TV is a fairly passive activity. You don't do much when you're watching TV, so you can do it no matter how bad you're feeling because you don't have to perform, right? When you're actually doing something, you're trying to perform well generally. So it worked out perfect, right? Feeling really bad, you lay down on in the recliner and put that under my neck, and it's doing the lordosis thing, and I do it for a long periods of time, a couple hours a lot of times. Well, as I start to feel better, I watch less and less TV because I do other stuff, because I can do other stuff. Well, then I'm not doing as much of the lordosis, and then I start feeling worse, right? So, but then I start feeling worse, so I start watching more TV and doing more lordosis, but then I start feeling better, so I stop watching TV and do less lordosis. It's an interesting little yo-yo game I've been playing, but it definitely has solidified that the lordosis is working on that lordotic curve is making a difference with my neck for sure, and throughout my entire spine. Actually, I can feel it all the way down to the bottom of my lumbar spine. So really interesting, and I'm going to try out that floaty tube because it's about 3 inches wide, and I bought a couple of them, tried different sizes, 3 inches wide, and it squishes a little bit and seems to work good. And I mean, the towel's working good for now too, but that would be more consistent. The towel kind of shifts and moves its shape a little bit, so that'll be very interesting. And I just feel like there's more stuff I could talk about, but I don't want to talk forever. One, because I have to process this and get it on YouTube, and that takes a little bit to upload, and so I'm going to be up late, or later than now, and I need to go to sleep because I have to work soon. I don't know if I mentioned last time, but I'm getting a raise through a little bit of a raise through both of the companies I teach for. So the one company I'll be at $14 an hour, the one company I'll be at $19 an hour. Work 3 to 4 hours every morning, but you have to realize it's not all uptime because I do have some dead classes, some empty classes, and a little bit of paperwork too, so it's actually not super easy to calculate. So I'm still making like less than $1,000 a month, so it's not much money at all. And I have a bunch of really cool writing ideas, but I have to do something to change how I approach my productivity because, well, so we know my conscientiousness scores put me in the 0th percentile. I'm not conscientious, which my orderliness scores score in the 0th percentile. I'm not naturally orderly. And my industriousness scores are in the 0th percentile. I'm not naturally industrious. These are your natural tendencies. So to a large extent, I fought those, but you're gonna, I mean, when they're that extreme, you're gonna lose a lot of the time. So I have to change something, and personality-wise and life-wise, I'm hitting a plateau. So when you're stuck in a plateau, well, first of all, you have to realize it, which a lot of times is hard to do. And second of all, you have to change something. You have to change something, get it off of the plateau. And I mean, that's why I've been able to make progress on my neck, because I've hit several plateaus and then I changed something and adjusted. But in life in general, I need to do the same thing, and I need to make some sort of big change. So there's a few things that can cause big personality changes, which are sustainable. One is psychedelics, which they've done some really interesting research with. I mean, like if you have a major experience, say like religious experience, something like that, on say mushrooms, something like that, then 85% of people, it will cure their smoking. If they're trying to quit smoking, right? And then you take psychedelics and you have a religious experience, 85% of people, bam, that one experience, done. Like incredible results and crazy stuff with PTSD and all sorts of stuff, really good results. So they have ability to change it at a really fundamental level. Obviously, the synthetic stuff is way more dangerous because basically synthetic stuff always is. Usually it's made just so people can copyright and trademark and patent and stuff now to make money off it, but also they can get stronger effects off it and stuff like that. So really interesting. That's one option. And then there's other options like trying to, the thing I was showing in here, like the what if pattern, for really get serious with that and play with that. Maybe that'll be all cause a big change. We'll see. I have some interesting stuff that's going to be coming out in writing, I think. Some interesting concepts that I have invented and come up with over the last several years, and I haven't expressed very much, but you know, might as well. So an economic concept, epistemological concept, maybe some more of that grief stuff, because I think that's super important. We'll see how it goes. some interesting stuff in literature itself, which I've been thinking about starting that company. I looked into starting the Chinese company for teaching, and if you were to follow all the laws and regulations, it would be like $16 million, which now I forgot that I can't mention China in these videos, otherwise China blocks the video, so I can't upload this video to China, which, you know, some of my students would watch it if I could upload it, but as soon as you mention China, China blocks your video from being viewable in China. So they're harder to do business with than Nigeria, like officially, like on the list of countries how easy it is to do business. China ranks below Nigeria, right? Nigeria's way down, way down, 100 and something. I mean, there's a lot of countries, but China's like 130th, right? It's not easy, and literally like $16 million. So I'll probably not follow that law and maybe start a company there, but then China might just turn off the website and right there goes the business. But the literature one would be pretty interesting. Readwithjeff.com, I own it, but I haven't done anything with it, and I've been really, I have a natural tendency to study more than produce, and so I've been studying literature like crazy and really trying to put together a structural framework to assess it and analyze it, and I think I have to a large extent. Well, there's two aspects. So very quickly, there's structure and there's readability in this framework that I'm making up. And in structure, there's style and there's story, right? So the stylistic elements of structure are made up of two parts: the sentences and the paragraphs, simply, right? And there's a lot that goes into those. I mean, there's the dialogue attribution of sentences, so interstitial sentences, and you can get really complex in those things. But just in general, there's structure, there's style and story. In style, there's sentences and paragraphs that you can break it down into. In story, there's scenes and series of scenes, which maybe I should come up with a different word for series of scenes, like sequence, series, whatever. Series of scenes, essentially a plot. And if you break it down at those levels, it really allows you to see the structure of the style and the story. It's super interesting. I really like that framework, and I made it up, but I think it makes a lot of sense. Then readability-wise is based off the two sins of writing, which I made this up too, right? But the two sins of writing are confusion and boredom. Like if you bore the reader, bam, you're done. They're going to put the book down. I got this from my reading experience, right? I'm reading, I'm bored, bam, done. I'm reading, I'm confused, bam, done. So you can't read, or you can't bore or confuse the reader. So those are the two sins of writing. And that plays into readability perfectly, right? Because confusion is all about communication and adequate communication, which leads right into the semantic triangle and the semantic square, which I won't explain those right now, but it's about this clarity of communication. And then the other aspect, the boredom, leads into excitement, which comes in emotional investment, which comes with identifying with the character possibly, but in a more general way, which includes identifying with the character. It's a threat or a peril or the possibility of not achieving a value, right? If you're going to lose a value, it's intense. You're not bored. You're really wrapped up in it. And this confusion and boredom, or that they're opposites, right? Which are this clarity and this excitement. Those combined are what is the major part of, one, making it readable, but two, getting meaning, pulling meaning out of the text. So that's the framework that I've been working with and just inventing, really, and working with now. That I might do like a paid book club on readwithjeff.com, which isn't up yet, doesn't exist. I mean, I own it, but nothing's there. And I'm inhibited in starting that because I feel like it might fail, or maybe I'm not qualified, something like that. So I have to get over some of those mental hurdles and start really pursuing some stuff here, because I need to make a change in trajectory, essentially. Anyways, that's a lot of stuff. So until next time, this is Jeff, out. Bye.